creates a situation at least where Chair Gensler is going to be in front of in front of House Financial Services and Senate Banking right when the enforcement actions are assumed to be slowing down. And that'll be towards the end of the month. And so the question is, after all these actions and all these resources the SEC has, a lot of it does seem to be going to crypto, to the one sector. When they police, various other sectors here, a lot of the attention is going to this one sector. And the question is, A, how are you using those resources? B, are you overexpanding your jurisdiction? And C, are you going to even win these cases?
This content is brought to you by BitGo, which is one of the top crypto custodians in the crypto industry. BitGo works with many big companies and brands, such as Pantera Capital, Bitstamp, and Bitcoin IRA. Nike also selected BitGo to power its wallets for its NFTs. And BitGo has many great services, such as hot wallets, custodial wallets, self-managed cold wallets, and NFT wallets. Many institutions trust BitGo with its top-level security and incredible services, such as being able to deploy your capital while it's in custody, which includes lending, borrowing, trading, staking, DeFi access, and more. If you'd like to learn more about BitGo, please visit bitgo.com, link in the description. Welcome to the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and with me today is Ron Hammond, who's the Director of Government Relations at the Blockchain Association. Ron, great to see you.
Tony, always good to be with you. It's great to be back. A lot to cover, unfortunately.
Yeah, Ron, I know in the summer period in August, it was a bit boring, not much to report on. Everybody was on summer break, so to speak. But we're back to business. Let's talk about the DeFi hearing that took place last week. What was the purpose or goal of this, and were there any major outcomes?
Yes, definitely. So I was there actually last week. It was a pretty robust hearing. I mean, if you kind of take a step back here, DeFi, it's very, very complicated. Crypto, it's very, very complicated policy topic. And we've seen that happen year over year over year, where members of Congress are struggling over their words, not really understanding the technology. And don't get me wrong, we did see some of that in the DeFi hearing. But I have to say, the education level that has really shown itself off through both Democrats and Republicans asking some pretty pointed questions on both use cases as well as like regulatory obligations in the DeFi space was pretty remarkable. I was really shocked about how in the weeds a lot of these members of Congress got into, something that we would never have expected 2 years ago. And let's think about it, take a step back as well. This is the first hearing on DeFi. It's come up constantly in a lot of these bill negotiations that we've mentioned where they try to apply centralized exchange regulations to DeFi. But that's the only context it's really come up, at least when it comes to policy. But now we at least are having an educational hearing. And Congress is pretty well-versed. Again, it's a small subset. So it was a subcommittee. So these are the members of Congress who are constantly dealing with crypto issues. But if you ask anyone in the crypto space, DeFi is very complicated, let alone when it comes to a member of Congress who only has a couple of minutes every week or month to dedicate to learning this stuff. And so I was really, really impressed about the attendance, because it's really easy not to attend a really complicated hearing. I saw all the time when I was a Hill staffer back in 2017, when there was a crypto hearing, about half the people would show up because they were scared, what we call it at the time being Facebooked, when you would go to a hearing, think you would say something like to land a punch, and it actually ends up that you have no idea as a member of Congress what you're talking about, and you see a meme about you on Twitter within an hour. So a lot of members were really scared about that from that Facebook hearing back then. That has subsided. So I think it's really good for us going into 2025 and looking at like, hey, let's tackle DeFi. Of course, we still haven't tackled market structure. We still haven't tackled stablecoins yet fully. But the DeFi conversations are happening, and at least the Republicans in the House really seem eager to move forward, maybe with something in 2025 addressing DeFi in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, absolutely. I was pleasantly surprised by this, and that we're having this conversation. I think that's the start of most of this, right? Before we get to legislation, we got to have a conversation, get people educated. And the fact that it was on DeFi, which is one of the most complex aspects of crypto, and it's hard for many folks to understand. I'm really happy to see this type of turnout and dialogue happening. So that's really great. Now, Ron, I thought, with all the political talk and all the things that were happening with the SEC this year, that maybe election cycles coming up, the SEC is going to calm down, but they hit the ground running. And they sent a Wells notice to OpenSea, and it looks like they're going to continue their attack. What are you hearing about the SEC's ramp up of activities?
It's sort of expected because it is towards the end of their fiscal year. Actually, fun fact, the government shuts down technically at the end of September. So this is when their fiscal year runs out. And for a lot of agencies, and they want to try to pad their stats and they try to show that, hey, like we did the mandate by Congress going after companies or at least patrolling our respective industries. So there's usually a huge whirlwind of actions around this time frame. So for folks in DC, it's not shocking to see this ramp up. But what is shocking is it's a very, very, very heavily focused on crypto. I know Keurig got a hit with the K-Cups from the SEC as well, but largely it's been mostly crypto companies getting hit, whether it be Wells notices or they're selling with them or fines or what have you. And this creates a situation at least where Chair Gensler is going to be in front of in front of House Financial Services and Senate Banking right when the enforcement actions are assumed to be slowing down. That'll be towards the end of the month. And so the question is, after all these actions and all these resources the SEC has, a lot of it does seem to be going to crypto, to the one sector. When they police, various other sectors here, a lot of the attention is going to this one sector. And the question is, A, how are you using those resources? B, are you overexpanding your jurisdiction? And C, are you going to even win these cases? And I think that's a lot of the questions that folks on Capitol Hill on both sides of the aisle are asking here, but they're pretty brazen. And the SEC, if they were even politically a little motivated here, or at least politically savvier, I would say, is that they're going up against an industry that has now the largest industry pack out of any industry right now. And they are spending on both sides of the aisle here. And they're finding themselves now with Republicans who are largely going to be against the SEC, regardless of the actions. It's just how politics works. But we're seeing Democrats join the Republicans, a lot of them now. And that's been through votes or through letters. And they've been really criticizing the SEC. So the question is, how much of an island is Chair Gensler putting himself on? And I think a lot of that happens with his moves in crypto. And that's really weird to say that one industry and how one regulator is attacking this industry is now making him a political liability. And so we will see how this all plays out next week. I have a lot of members of Congress and their staff reaching out. It's going to be a fiery hearing next week, both in the House and the Senate. I think the question, though, is, does the SEC keep going forward with these Wells notices? I mean, there is a Wells notice with for OpenSea, for example, but do they go forward with the suit? If they do, I mean, that's a whole nother ballgame we're looking at here. But I will say that at least when it comes to Capitol Hill, folks are really firing up here, and we're seeing a lot of pre-messaging in front of this Gensler hearing that we'll be seeing this week to build the narrative of, hey, this is it's not just a Republican versus Democrat issue. This is a Gensler versus a lot more folks, a bipartisan set of members, as well as a really powerful industry now in DC.
Now, I saw Patrick McHenry and Jim Jordan. I think they put out a letter that they're going to investigate Gary Gensler about political favoritism. What are you hearing about that?
Yes, I'm not as engaged on this one, but this comes from the Judiciary Committee as well as OGR. So these comes from committees that usually are more political in nature. They tend to be all Republicans going against a Democrat administration or vice versa. When Trump was president a couple of years back, so at least in this age, it could be a very political messaging situation. But it does show that, hey, there have been a lot of reports about the SEC being very politically motivated, especially when it comes to certain industries, but also just certain policy conversations as a whole and directions of the agency. And so they're supposed to be, for many of these staff, unless they're in the commissioner's office, very much nonpartisan, apartisan, whatever you want to call it. But the Republicans here are alleging that there is political bias here and that they're only hiring those who are more of the progressive side. So, we'll see how this culminates here. I think this is more pre-messaging. I think another thing you're going to see is a hearing this week on the SEC enforcement actions in the digital asset space in particular. The chief legal officer for Robinhood, for example, Dan Gallagher, is going to be testifying at that hearing on Wednesday. And I think it's setting the stage for what is going to be that big hearing next week. They've waited all year for Gensler to come in front of Congress, and they are laying out the case week by week of where they think he has failed, whether it be more politically biased or more going after one certain industry, or going through just providing enforcement action solely and no clear rules of the road. And I think they're really doing a good job, at least building that narrative. The question is, how many Democrats will join the Republicans here, especially when the election is so close? And right now, we've been seeing inkling of folks bucking the normal trend of going back to their respective party and saying, no, I'll go after Gensler because there's a difference between going after my party and going after one individual who, in my opinion, or whoever the member of Congress is, has overstepped his bounds.
Yeah. And Ron, I don't know how much this is seen in DC and so forth, but from my perspective, I see a clear divide at the SEC where Republicans, Hester Peirce, Mark Ueda, are more for getting legislation and clarity, while it seems Gensler and the other two Democrat commissioners are anti-crypto. Yeah, we've seen them vote in that way. Even though Gensler, we could argue, with the Grayscale case, he voted for the Bitcoin ETF while the other two Democrats voted no. But I mean, how did the agency become so political, and why is there this clear divide?
If you talk to a lot of folks, they'll give you a lot of different answers. And also, when it's Republicans who are usually in charge of the SEC, a lot of the Democrats say they're not policing enough. And then it usually inverses where folks say, if it's a Democrat administration, Republicans typically say you're over policing here. So there's that balance that always strikes here. But at least when it comes to Gensler and him in particular, he's been losing ground on a lot of his policy decisions, both within the courts, but also in politics. Because I'll never forget when he came in front of the House Financial Services Committee years ago for his first time, he said, we don't need crypto legislation. The rules are very clear. And he has lost both in the courts, but also the White House when they vetoed or sent a non-veto notice, I guess, for FIT 21, the market structure bill. Right. They said that they're open to working on a framework with House Republicans and House Democrats that would create a framework for regulating the markets for digital assets. And that is very much a 180 from where Chair Gensler was. And again, a lot of times the White House is going to defer to their agency, who's the subject matter expert on this issue. And they have been losing that as well. So we're seeing Gensler coming in with really strong, heavy hand with both the law and politics early in his career at the SEC. And that has eroded over time. Now he's going to point to some court cases where he's got victories, but there is a long list of those where he is either stalling out or that they've lost a case. And so we will see how that culminates into whether he's a political liability for Harris. And I think that's the main question is, will he be, if there is a Harris administration, will he be still at the SEC? Will he be moved elsewhere to another agency? Where is his role at? And we've seen absolutely nothing. And it's not just crypto who's asking these questions. Wall Street's asking these questions too, because they're getting hit from the SEC on a variety of other fronts, and they're pushing back and winning in some cases too. So I think that there's going to be a lot of questions with, that subtle tie to the election itself, because we are in election season. This is always what's going to be in the back of mind for folks. And so far, at least in the Harris team, it's been radio silent of what happened to the future of Gary Gensler. And that is a little concerning.
Yeah, we haven't heard one thing from Kamala Harris around crypto. We've heard some talks from a campaign advisor, if I'm not mistaken, saying she will support crypto policy. But, I don't know. This is a hard question to answer, but do you think she might say something before the election to take this issue off the table? Or is it so much of a divide that because Donald Trump has kind of owned the issue that she's not going to?
I think there's two factors I'm looking at right now. So I think we're pretty much close to the point that she's going to mention crypto. I think it's gotten, now we're focusing on the top 5-10 issues in the United States politics right now. Abortion, the economy, the border, and those things are going to be dominating the talking points for the next 2 months. And so it's really hard to see crypto getting a comment in from Kamala Harris. I think folks who were expecting that at the debate, and a lot of folks in DC were very much assuming that crypto was not going to come up. I was looking at Poly Market. I saw CAS is below crypto when it comes to odds there, but I had a feeling CAS is going to come up because of the whole Springfield, Ohio situation. But moving forward, I think the problem is that they're going to be focusing on their mainline issues. Crypto is just not in the top 10, not in the top 15 right now. And the last thing also is this whole Trump Project Liberty project that also is kind of murking the waters here, because even though it's not Donald Trump personally behind this project, allegedly, it's just Don Jr. As well as Eric and a few others from all sources that we're seeing in the media. That allegedly being launched on Monday at 8 p.m. He's going to do an announcement. Trump is, and a lot of folks in DC are wondering a lot of questions, both like who's behind this, why. But I think also this just creates enough of an ambiguity in terms of a way where it's probably better or at least the Kamala folks, I would probably just stay away from it completely, because this could be either A, just a massive blow up for the Trump campaign again, but also B, there's just a lot of questions of what the heck is this? And so I think all that murkiness is enough for her and other folks, at least in the campaign world, to stay away from it and focus on their other mainline issues that they have polling for, that they're, in their view, win the narrative on. And I think that's just going to steamroll. So Now, the question also, lastly, is what does Trump do after the announcement? Does Trump keep doubling down on crypto to try to force her to talk about this? We saw this last week with the economic speech in New York, where Trump again mentions crypto, and the crowd's pretty quiet. But all of a sudden, he mentions crypto, and there's applause from Wall Street. And you see him looking around for a little bit, being like, "Oh, very similar to Nashville, where he was recognizing that there is a reaction from the crowd." And he is an entertainer. He does lean into a lot with the crowd energy, and so. Does he push back on that or use that to his advantage in other rallies or other events or speeches? We'll see. But I think this project itself, as well as Trump's actions and words leading to the election, we'll see if Kamala will ever, try to come back or to say anything positive in this space. But right now, I don't see that situation happening at the current moment.
I am a bit concerned about this Trump crypto platform thing because, to your point, I hope this thing doesn't blow up. That is the last thing this industry needs. It will be not as big as FTX, obviously, but it would just be another black saying, oh, see, right? And folks don't understand the nuances and what's happening here. So I'm hoping this is not some thing that's going to crash. Hopefully, I don't know, they can delay it, like wait till the election's over or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that was a concern for me in the DeFi hearing. We had to prep the witnesses, just like, hey, look, like this could come up, and it sounds weird to say this, but like this is politics, and when Trump puts his name on anything, it's going to come up in the political sphere, especially in our really niche space. And so we actually didn't see that come up too much. It was only like 2 or 3 members on the Democrat side, which I was encouraged by. At least the conversation in the DeFi hearing was more heavy on the policy. And even though folks disagree on the policy, at least there was conversation more on the policy and less about the politics with Trump being involved in DeFi. So I think that's good. At least we're having meaningful dialogue instead of just having noise dialogue and just, almost like a in live Twitter at this point. But at the same time, there's a lot of questions. I think both in my crypto circles as well as my political circles, a lot of these people just do not know who's involved in this group. I know some of these names have been released from the project itself, but to your point, it doesn't seem like anyone's really cheering for this, at least in both of these circles that I'm in. And there's a lot more questions than answers. And so we'll see what happens. But it does seem more business related, not politically motivated. But time will tell. We will have to see what happens.
Ron, I forgot to ask you earlier about SOB 121 because I've been hearing rumblings and seeing reports that the SEC, they are looking to maintain that, even though there's been major pushback, and that they're giving special preference to certain banks to bypass SOB 121. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, there's been a lot of questions about this because after the veto failed, again, the most bipartisan bill that Joe Biden has vetoed in this administration was repealing SOB 121. You had the third most high-ranking official in D.C., Chuck Schumer, literally vote for it. So, that's a very telling sign here, very bipartisan. And now that we're seeing some of the political ramifications, that political pushback from SAB 121 really kind of started to culminate a little bit with the SEC saying, well, large institutions, you can get a pass here. Again, the rules are still seem a little murky in terms of who all qualifies and such. But that is directly, ticking off a lot of members of Congress who were behind this effort to repeal it entirely. They're saying, well, if you think that these large institutions should be exempt, why? So who are you really targeting here? And also why? This does not make sense, this whole entire rule here. So the banks getting a pass here is a little frustrating in terms of just, hey, crypto also needs to have these folks not be by the same hampering rules. But at the same time, I think it's showing that the political pushback does lead to some policy change. So we are seeing that positive a little bit. Now, the question is, how far will it go? And I think we'll see that later on. But don't get me wrong, SAB 121 is a very still hot topic on Capitol Hill. It's going to be coming up probably a decent amount in the Gensler hearing. We could even see legislation advance out of the House that repeals it. But again, it'll be a standard repeal, not like the repeal that we saw with the Congressional Review Act that had a mandate timeline. So we will see how this plays out, but there's a lot of bipartisan pushback on SAB 121. And if they think they can just give some banks a pass here and pacify all the political concerns, they're going to have a rude awakening pretty soon, probably.
Man, I can't. I'm looking forward to that hearing. Let's see what
it's going to be spicy. Watch out.
Yeah. So final item here. You mentioned Chuck Schumer earlier, and he at the crypto for Harris town hall, he said he was ready to get crypto legislation through by the end of the year. I know election season is we're in the midst of it, and Do you expect any bills to make it through? What's happening with Fit 21? What's happening with the Lummis-Gillibrand bill in the Senate?
So right now we have not heard anything. Nothing's been public in terms of what's the next step for the Senate agriculture bill. Again, it's a market structure bill. It's sort of like the 21, but it is different enough where they have to go through their own process in the Senate and then combine it with the House. That takes a long time. And right now, if we were back in July, I would say like this would be the week in September that they would have to probably vote this ag committee if they want to get to the Senate floor for Schumer to have a vote on it. We haven't seen that yet. And also we haven't seen the text yet. And I think that is pretty indicative that this is going to probably stall out, but it's not dead by any means. This could come back tomorrow. We could see the bill text drop and we could have a hearing maybe at the end of the week or early next week. It really just depends. But at least right now, the longer this time goes on, the more and more market structure stalls. And it's really frustrating for me, at least in particular, because we were kind of in this space with stablecoins 2 years ago, where in the Senate Bank Committee, different committee, but in the Senate, we had a deal on stablecoins almost across the finish line. And right when the election stuff was hit in September, it stalled out. And 2 years later, still no stablecoin regime. The House has passed theirs, but the Senate has been a constant factor here, has slowing the process down. So it's hard to tell exactly, again, what is going to be in this Senate agriculture bill, this market structure bill. Is it going to be good for the industry? Is it going to be good only for centralized exchanges? There's a lot of questions that we're still wondering. But the longer this goes on, the odds and prospects of crypto legislation passing at the end of the year are pretty slim. And again, we have one more week after this, and it's the election. And that's going to be very indicative also of what's going to happen. Are they going to be able to pass this stuff in the lame duck at the last second, knowing that there's going to be a change in the guard, or maybe not a change in the guard? We'll see. So a lot of stuff, unfortunately, now is the election. And it's stalled out. And again, we're really telling folks in DC, hey, look, this happened to stablecoins 2 years ago. We cannot be here in 2 more years down the road and having it stall out again. We need to move forward here. At least let's get stablecoins done. At least let's try to get some market structure done or some positive step forward, because right now the politics, unfortunately, is dragging us out.
Yeah. Fingers crossed, man, that something is done, but looking like it's more 2025, right? As far as probabilities.
Likely. But again, to think that we've gotten to this point, it's pretty incredible. Again, I remember you on the show several times saying crypto is not going to be an election issue. And we are square in the middle of it. It's on the Republican platform. Harris is getting asked about it, and having, many folks in the industry trying to win her support for the industry itself. So the fact that we're here is pretty incredible. I'm really shocked. But legislatively, Congress moves slow. They got to prevent a shutdown before next week. And I think we got to try our best to get good policy forward bipartisanly. And this is why we got to make sure it stays bipartisan, because if we just have crypto be all the Republicans, and the Republicans don't have full unanimous power of the House, Senate, and admin, guess what? We're going to have to work with Democrats in some way, shape, or form. Otherwise, it's just going to stall out. So we got to keep the good bipartisan efforts moving. And we got to make sure we call out the SEC too, because that is going to be the focal point of this industry is the SEC's aggressiveness. And Capitol Hill on both sides of the aisle has relayed that message. Now, the question is, where's Gary Gensler's fate after the election? We'll see. But it has been, unfortunately, a little telling that we have not seen any word on his future from the Harris camp or Harris administration, which could indicate he could be around in some form or fashion come next 2025. So we will see where that leads us here. But the hope is at least we can see some encouragement from the Harris folks say maybe the direction the SEC or maybe the direction the SEC is taking in this one industry is not the way to go. But so far, that's not happened yet.
Ron, always great information, my friend. I know you're a bit under the weather. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate the insights.
I apologize for everyone who is attempting to listen. My voice is a little gone. So thanks again.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate you.